Hello, everyone. So, something that has always been on my heart, on my mind a lot, is what does it mean to, lay down my life in the way that Christ laid down his life, but in such a way that I don't feel diminished by it, if I'm absolutely honest with myself, right? In a way that actually gives me life, that makes me feel more myself. The reason this has always been on my mind is because, if you've listened to my earlier episodes on the Becoming Me podcast or heard me tell my life story before about on my journey, you'd know that for the longest time, I didn't have a good sense of myself because I come from an enmeshed family system. There were no boundaries. While I was trained and taught to be selfless, to be loving, I grew up in a Catholic household. My parents were first generation Catholics. You know, the scriptures, the gospel, the mention of God, of Jesus, the example of Jesus was never far in my upbringing. So I knew all these things were important to give of myself, to be loving, to lay my life down. The problem was I couldn't seem to know how this could happen without brewing resentment in me or without me feeling like I don't have a choice or even in what was modeled to me. Okay, unfortunately, as we live in a broken world, the figures, the people that were my mentors, my teachers, my caregivers, they had their own take and interpretation, maybe a distorted interpretation of what laying down their lives meant too. Some of these came from our culture, some maybe are generational patterns or cultures within the larger culture or within the family that's been passed down. And so I absorbed all that. And what came out was often this compulsion sometimes to lay my life down. It's a blend. Okay, I want to say it's a blend, it's a mix, it's a very interesting mix of genuine desire. There's a part of me that really would like to be able to lay my life down for others, to give of myself. But I couldn't do it in a way that was free and that was authentic because there was this compulsion as well that I needed to do it. I had to do it because if I didn't do it, then I would be bad. If I couldn't lay down my life, then I would be selfish. And selfish was bad, and that would mean that I am unworthy of love. So because there's this component of compulsion, over time, I think the compulsion won out. I had to try and be selfless. I loved people, passionately. I loved my friends passionately. I did my best. But because I felt like I tried so hard to lay my life down, to give myself to others, when it wasn't reciprocated, when I didn't feel that the other person appreciated it or would return the favor, I would always feel so betrayed. It may sound a little melodramatic, but I remember as a teenager, especially, I guess most teenagers are maybe somewhat melodramatic. I felt very betrayed. I felt devastated. Like I would do so much for you. Why is it that you can't love me as much as I love you? Right? And this played out in more significant relationships as I grew older, as I came into adulthood and I started dating and I got married. And it wasn't until I began the integration journey, the healing journey, when I began to have my eyes open to the shadows in my life. It was only then actually that I realized that there was something very unhealthy and very dysfunctional about the way I was going about trying to love others, right? What I thought was laying my life down. So I want to talk about the difference between self-abandonment, which ultimately is I think what I learned to do. I learned to abandon myself in a way that was emotionally unhealthy. Okay, I want to talk about the difference between self-abandonment and self-gift. Okay, when I actually make a gift of myself, my life, my time, my energy, whatever it is, without abandoning myself. So that's a distinction that I think I didn't really hear talked about much when I was younger. Certainly, there was no difference in the way that it was modeled to me. I would say that my childhood heroes or heroines, they would sacrifice themselves greatly. I think I always thought it was self-gift, but perhaps there was actually a lot of self-abandonment involved as well, because there were always some undercurrents of resentment, of such a heavy burden of duty and obligation that ultimately sometimes with these people, I didn't really see that they were more alive or more themselves. If anything, some of them came across as being very bitter and very petty, and resentful and angry when the people around them did not value their sacrifice, right? And that cannot be the kind of self-gift that Christ was modeling for us. So self-abandonment versus self-gift, or you may have heard the term kenosis, right, which is self-emptying, the self-emptying of Christ. And we hear this term so often in spiritual context and religious context, in religious education, in catechism, in faith formation, in retreats. This exhortation to imitate Christ's self-giving. So something that had came to me when I don't know, maybe this is more than 10 years ago now. I was in the midst of, a very busy season of being in full-time ministry in the parish. It started off very well. I think there was a lot of joy. There was a lot of freedom in the way I was giving myself. But pretty soon I got caught up again in my old dysfunctional patterns, and it began to feel laborious. I began to burn out. I began to feel like I didn't have a choice. I had to keep giving more and more and more. The demands would never diminish, and I always felt like I had to meet the demand, the needs. So at some point in a time of prayer, I felt Christ ask me, "And what life are you laying down in the first place?" Because I always say I'm trying to lay down my life. And this verse came to me, right? This is actually from the Gospel of John. And this is what Jesus said with regards to him laying down his life. He said, "No one takes my life from me. I give my life of my own free will." Okay, or some translation says, "I give my life of my own accord." No one takes my life from me. And I felt Christ ask me, can you say the same? Can you say the same, that no one is taking your life from you and that you are laying down your life of your own free will? And I realized that I couldn't say that. I couldn't say that because the honest reality was I felt like my life was being demanded of me. Sometimes I felt like, well, Christ, Jesus, aren't you the one demanding my life? Aren't you the one saying that, if I were to be your disciple, I have to lay down my life and pick up my cross and follow you? I have to do what you did? And that's so telling, isn't it? He did say that. But I never felt like I really had a choice. You see, this is so subtle. And I think many of you may actually be able to identify with it if you take a moment and you think about your experience of all the times that, let's say, you sacrifice yourself, when you do something as what you think of as laying down your life for someone. Do you really feel like you have a choice, and that there was a space where you would not be diminished if you didn't give it? You didn't feel that you'd be less worthy of love if you didn't do it. You didn't think that you would be disappointed with yourself, or that God would be disappointed in you, or that other people will be upset with you. They may be, but the point is, do you feel, right, that in spite of all that people may be upset with you, that you're not diminished if you don't do this, and that you really do have a choice? in laying down your life. For me, that was a foreign, not just a foreign concept. I couldn't remember a time I felt that way. Because how can I say I have a choice? If I don't do it, then I'm not a good disciple. If I don't do it, then I'm not a good daughter. I'm not kind or selfless. And I couldn't deal with my self-image. My ego couldn't deal with a self-image that was less than perfect and giving and always laying down my life. So that was the bind I was caught in. And when Jesus confronted me, I think God confronted me by asking me, can you say what I say, that I lay my life down of my own accord? No one takes it from me. That was when I knew I had to grow in freedom, that I didn't have that interior freedom, that I didn't know how to love in an emotionally healthy way. I didn't have an emotionally healthy spirituality, that the love that I was giving is not that it's not love at all. Maybe a very distorted love. It was a very compulsed love. It was a giving with a hook, because I was giving something, expecting or hoping in a way that I would get something in return, because I couldn't give that something to myself. Okay, so that's what I mean by self-abandonment. So I'm just going to go through some descriptions, okay, of what it feels like to abandon myself, or when you might identify with this, when you abandon yourself, versus what it feels like when you are actually making a genuine self-gift of yourself. All right. So when it is self-abandonment, I often feel frozen or numb in my body, because it's something that I need to do. It's something I have to do. If there is any part of me that actually feels like I don't want to do this, my automatic response last time was to just dissociate or numb it out, because that's not helpful since I need to do it anyway. Okay, so I'll feel numb or frozen in my body. I feel like I don't really have a real choice. Okay, I've mentioned this before, because if I don't do it, then I'm not a good person and I'm not worthy of love. And I want to be worthy of love. I want to be a good person. I need to be a good person. You hear that? It's like, I don't have a choice then. If I want to be a good person, I have to give of myself. Okay, so that's what self-abandonment feels like. I don't have a choice. And I'm also at the same time laser focused on doing the right thing. It's like a very narrow perception of what the right thing is in this particular instance. There's only one right answer. There's one right way. Everything else, every other possibility would mean that I'm selfish. I'm not selfless. I'm not following Christ. This way of thinking, I think, reflects also what I hear a lot in my life. Sometimes the narrative, the language that is used around me when I was a child, people may not be talking about me, but they may be talking about other people. It could be adults in my life, in my family. It could be priests. It could be other adults in church. I listen to the way they talk about people, who is praised, who is criticized, who is praised as holy, who is good, who is bad. All that went into shaping the sense for me, right? So that, and in my upbringing, doing the right thing is very, very specific, and it's almost like a do or die thing. So I can become very, very laser focused on that to the exclusion of everything else. And when I'm so laser focused, there's no room for nuance. There's no room for really looking at the larger context, or even thinking that maybe in a different scenario, each time something happens, that maybe the context is a little different and maybe a different response may be possible. For me, it was very black and white. No, there's a right thing and there's a wrong thing, and I have to do the right thing. Okay, what else? In self-abandonment, when I abandon myself to be kind to somebody else, I ultimately feel betrayed. If that sacrifice that I made, if it was not reciprocated or appreciated, if the gift that I made, okay, or the sacrifice that I made did not earn me the safety that I needed. Okay, so by safety here, I mean emotional safety. which is ultimately that I feel I am received, I feel that I am seen, that I am loved. Because ultimately, I mean, that's what I wanted. I mean, as a child, I just want to be loved, right? So if I do the right thing and I don't feel like I'm seen, I don't feel like I'm loved, I feel betrayed. Because ultimately, think about it, that was why I did the right thing in the first place, because I needed that love. I wanted that love, right? So I would feel betrayed if I didn't get the safety I needed. And so the sacrifice that I ultimately do, even if there is genuine good intention, like it's not that I don't care about this person at all, but when I extend myself beyond what I can freely give, there is an element of transaction there. I'm sacrificing for you so that you should sacrifice for me, so that between the two of us we will both receive what we need, right? So it's self-abandonment instead of self-care or self-love. I don't know how to look after myself. I only know how to try and buy that love from someone else by sacrificing myself. So when I self-abandon, I lose trust in myself. The more I do it, the more I lose trust in myself. Just think about how empty it is, how empty it feels when you have done this over and over again. You've laid your life down, so to speak. You've sacrificed yourself and it's not appreciated. It's not seen. Or when you need someone's not there for you. You don't just kind of get sad and lose faith in relationships or friendships and people. At a more fundamental level, you lose faith with yourself. You lose trust in yourself, because you keep abandoning yourself, right? That's quite a sucky friend. In a sense, that's quite a sucky person to be, someone who keeps abandoning him or herself. So you lose trust in yourself. I lost so much trust in myself without even knowing, because I don't believe, my growing up years, I don't think I've ever experienced what it was like to really trust myself. I always needed an external gaze, someone else's opinion of me, judgment of me, to give me a sense of whether I was doing okay or not, whether I was right or I was wrong. It was so insidious. Okay, so I didn't have self-trust for the longest time, and so I couldn't be myself. And of course, when you keep abandoning yourself that way, you become codependent. I was very codependent on others in order to make up for this lack of self-attunement. And so it just becomes a toxic cycle. Self-abandonment does empty you. In a sense, it's a kind of self-emptying, but it's a very emotionally unhealthy kind of self-emptying. It leads to very toxic relationship cycles. It leads to deep unhappiness. It leads to a diminished sense of self. You don't know who you are over time, and you're just miserable. And I just have to say that I actually see this a lot, especially among women. I think maybe not exclusively in women, but I see this a lot in women, and a lot of the young women that I cared for in the past, that I mentored and formed, the young women. And I see this in older women too. Some former clients that I've had or other friends that I've accompanied. Maybe there is a cultural expectation also, right? That women must always sacrifice. But what I see is this sense of abandonment and resignation. They can't say no. It's like even if they would like to, they don't feel like they have permission to say no. They need external permission to say no. They are not able to give themselves permission to draw the boundaries they need to say no. So self-abandonment becomes a way of life, and they're so often taken advantage of by family members, by friends, by colleagues, by bosses, in the church community. These are people that would keep on giving. It's not that difficult to get them to give because they don't know how to stand up for themselves. Okay? And it doesn't matter if you seem very confident and very capable. There are some very high achieving and high performing people out there. All right. They're not necessarily meek and shy, but they can't say no. Okay. So that's self-abandonment. So what would self-gift, on the other hand, look like? Okay. So a gift in a sense, presupposes that you made a choice to give it, right? And you didn't abandon yourself to have to make this gift of yourself, of your time, of your energy, whatever it is. So this is what I experience self-gift to be like. One, I can feel conflicting emotions sometimes when I have an opportunity to give of myself. Maybe it will be demanding. Maybe I know that it will really stretch me. Maybe I would rather not pass some part of me. Maybe that's a bit more self-preserving. Would rather not. But I am aware of all these different conflicting emotions. I am aware of my fatigue or my tiredness. I'm aware of, let's say, my dislike or my hesitation maybe to do something for this person. But at the same time, I'm also in touch with the part that says, I would like to be able to help this person, right? This person needs me right now. This person is very down. It's someone that I love, and it's going to stretch me. It's going to cost me, but I do genuinely have this element that I would like to help him or her. So in the process of self-gift, of healthy self-gift, I can tune into all these different emotions. Okay, I'm not just zeroed and fixated on doing the right thing. I can hear my own needs. I can also see the needs of the other person. And then another point is that my self-acceptance is not conditional on my ability to step up and give of myself. Okay, so when I'm operating out of self-abandonment, there's a part of me that feels I have no choice, because if I don't lay down my life, so to speak, for the other person, I'm going to hate myself. I'm going to judge myself. I'm going to think of myself as lazy and selfish, right? So there is going to be self-rejection if I don't give of myself. But in genuine, authentic self-gift, my self-love and self-acceptance is not under threat, right? I'm compassionate to myself. If I decide that I'm not going to do this for this person, I'm not going to think I'm a bad person. I just know that, right now my capacity just doesn't allow me to do this authentically. There is self-acceptance still, okay? And I can appreciate, the nuanced complexity of the whole situation and not lose sight of my needs. That's so important. In self-abandonment, I can't see my needs. My needs have no right to exist, in a sense, all right? In self-gift, okay, in kenosis, in this authentic self-giving or laying down of my life, I give from what I am freely able and willing to offer, right? This may sometimes overstretch myself. It doesn't mean that I'm always very careful with my energy. I'm aware, okay? So what I mean is, more often than not, I'm aware of my boundaries. I'm aware of what I can offer without burning out, without, let's say, maybe falling sick, yeah? But it doesn't mean that self-gift is always very measured. Self-gift can be extremely generous. It can sometimes overextend itself. But the point is that there is that moment of choice, of freedom, that I know I can not do this and I still love myself, that God still loves me. I'm not a bad person. But if I decide to give of myself and maybe even overstretch myself, it is freely done, which means that if then I do burn out a little, or if I fall sick, right, I accept that peacefully, actually, sometimes, if not joyfully, at least peacefully, because I made that choice. I made that, I had that freedom, and I made that choice to overstretch myself in this particular instance, or for this particular person, or during this season of my life, right? See, so that's a huge difference. I don't feel betrayed by myself or by the other person when I fall sick, for example, right? Because I'm at peace. The dignity of the gift that I give, this is another important point. This dignity is also not diminished when it is not appreciated. So what do I mean by that? When I'm giving out of a place of self-abandonment, I need the recipient of my gift, or whoever I'm sacrificing for, I need that person to see me, because that's a big reason why I'm abandoning myself, because I need that person's love, or I need praise, or I need some affirmation about the fundamental goodness of my being, right? So if I don't get that, or if I'm criticized, even after I have sacrificed myself, it's devastating because not only am I not seen, I'll feel so misunderstood and so wronged, right? And while that may be true, I may be wronged, I may be misunderstood, it hurts so much more because I don't have the resources within me to hold that pain, okay? Because I don't I was relying on the other person, on the other, to give me the validation that I needed, that I'm of worth. So when that person criticizes me or misunderstands me, I'm really left with nothing. But when I give from a place of genuine, authentic self gift, even if that person cannot see the value of what I've given, even if the person still chooses to criticize me because, let's say, the offer that I've given is not in the form of love that that person prefers. This happens. We have difficult people in our lives, right? I mean, sometimes they want to see something very specific and they may be very unreasonable, or they may be asking for something that we cannot authentically give. So when we discern what is it that I can genuinely and authentically give to love this person, and I make that gift, and it does cost me, but it's not what the other person wants, and that person maybe criticizes or misunderstands me, I do not feel diminished, neither do I feel the dignity of the gift that I've given as diminished. Right? I do not feel less. And this is so, so huge and so important, because then I'm still rooted in my worth. You know, I can even acknowledge that I'm not able to love this person the way they need, but I don't criticize myself for it. I don't see myself as a worse person for it. When I really give myself from a place of self-gift, authentically and freely, every time I self-gift, it strengthens my self-trust, and it actually strengthens my interior wholeness, because it's an integrative force or process, okay? Genuine, authentic self-gift, each doing it actually integrates us, because there's this whole process of being attuned to ourselves and to the other, being aware to the nuances and the complexity of the situation, and harnessing our freedom, right? And our compassion to make a choice to give. How much or how little, whatever it is, but it's free. And because it is freely given, it integrates us. It makes us feel actually more confident that we are able to grow in love, because love is a process. Every time I do this, a genuine self-gift of myself, I grow in my capacity to love. And over time, my generosity can really, really increase without me having to abandon myself and force myself and guilt myself or manipulate myself to do the right thing so that I am kind and selfless. No, I can actually genuinely grow in the kind of love that is unconditional, you can say, right? Unconditional in the sense, even if it's not a great sacrifice, whatever I'm able to give is unconditional, because even if you reject it or you criticize it, it's still freely given, and I'm not less for it. So self-gift is just so different, okay, from self-abandonment. We grow in our dignity and our self-possession. So then we can say, like Christ did, no one takes my life from me. I lay it down of my own accord. I give it freely. I give it freely, and even if it is not appreciated, I give it gladly. So that's what I have for today's little sharing about self-abandonment versus self-gift. I hope that some of what I said landed with you. I hope that it gives you something to think about your own experiences when you try to be self-sacrificing or selfless. The next time you're in that situation, or somebody makes an ask of you, or you're in a situation where you're called to be generous, can you pause and just tune in for a moment and ask yourself, how free am I to make this choice? Can I say I give freely because I choose to, because I'm ready to and I want to? Or am I driven by compulsion, by my need to appear a certain way to the other person or even to myself? Am I afraid that I will offend or disappoint God? if I'm not able to make this sacrifice or do this thing for someone, just be aware that in this whole process of interior integration, what we hope for, what we are working towards, is really to be able to pour ourselves out, in joyful response to being very, very loved, right? By God and by ourselves. And when it's a joyful response that we are giving, then our self-emptying in the form of self-gift, right? Emotionally healthy self-gift, it truly is life-giving to others and it's life-giving to us. When we give of ourselves out of self-abandonment, not only does it deplete our own joy, I'll tell you something, if you haven't already noticed this happening in your life, it takes life and joy away from the people that you're giving to as well. Because when we give out of self-abandonment, we often make the recipient of our gift feel like they owe us. They will feel a sense of imposition that they ought to be grateful. And if they're not grateful, we may make them feel it, right? I mean, whether or not we overtly say it or we're passive aggressive or in our body language or whatever it is, think of all the times that someone has sacrificed for you and you felt like you owed them. That's not really coming from a place of kenosis. And I'm so sorry if that's how you feel towards God. I know I used to feel that way towards God because God emptied himself for me. He sacrificed his life for me. I felt like, how can I not be grateful for that, right? But the reason I felt that way was because in my life, self-sacrifice was modeled to me and done for me or to me in such a way that it made me feel bound. It made me feel obligated. It made me feel like I owed something. And it took me so long and so many years of healing to realize that's not love. Well, that's a distorted love. That's not free and authentic love. And that the way God loves me, even though he did give everything for me, it sets me free. It mind boggles, right? It sets me free. It does not bind me into duty and obligation to be a good person. It does not bind me and obligate me to return his love, because genuine, authentic love always sets us free. And because it sets us free, there is so much joy that comes from receiving such love that we naturally want to respond by giving back and by giving freely, authentically. And I really hope that that's what all of us will come to experience over time as we heal and as we integrate. So thank you for listening to today's sharing. Bye.